So this weekend just gone, it was the UK's biggest annual retro gaming event, the mighty Play Expo in Manchester. Now, this is on every year, and it is the second time that I've been to it. I did go to the one back in 2014, and then it was actually only the second retro show that I'd ever been to. And that year, I was kind of a bit overwhelmed with it all, you know, playing on all the arcades and meeting people and playing on all the consoles and computers and buying stuff. I actually forgot to do any filming that year, which is something I've always kind of regretted a bit since, because it is such a, impressive looking place. So this year I was armed with my brand new trusty iPhone 7. I thought that I might get some nice video footage off that, and a bunch of us went down on Sunday. So I went down with like 5 guys, including Ravi, who I do my weekly Retro Hour podcast with, which is out every Friday. If you haven't heard it, check it out. And we met some really cool people there, hanging out with guys like Mev Dink, also John Hare of Sensible Software fame. He was down there showing off his new game, Sociable Soccer, which is kind of the spiritual successor to Sensi Soccer back in the day. Who else were there with? Jim Bagley, who was showing off the new ZX Spectrum Next. We also met Jeff Minter. He's got a new game coming out called Polybius. He was showing off on the PlayStation 4 VR and a couple of his older titles as well. So I'll show you all that video footage in a minute. Loads of free-to-play arcade machines. The day just shot by. It was such a good event. In fact, I'd say, I've been to maybe about 6 or 7 retro events in the last couple of years. This is by far the best one that I've been to so far. It was amazing. In terms of buying stuff, I didn't actually get all that many pickups. I was really more interested in, networking with people and playing on the arcade machines and the consoles. And also, I met a load of viewers and podcast listeners as well. So if you did come over and say hello, lovely to meet you. Thank you so much. So I'll show you the pickups I did get very quickly. There's not a lot of them this time. I did get a Nintendo 64 controller and rumble pack in black, which is pretty cool. Also, micro machines on the PS2, which I didn't actually know this came out on the PS2. Will be quite interesting to give this a try. It's only £5, so if it's crap, no major loss. And also, I bought a book that will probably make me rich one day. There we go. So apart from that, they were the only pickups that I got. It was really just about having fun, and did quite a bit of filming this year as well. So here you go. Here's a look at Play Expo 2016. Now, obviously, one of the main reasons to come to one of these shows is the amount of retailers that always take over the vast majority of the exhibition hall. And this year at Play, it was no different. Lots of people selling games and cartridges and systems and all sorts. As you can see here, the guys I was with my mates have been like vultures at all these classic-looking cartridges on the table. Even stuff like this as well. Lots of old magazine power pack cover tapes as well from back in the old days. Even stuff like Commodore 64 and 16 software on cassette tape. I think this stand here was the Retro Computer Museum guys from Leicester. And also they had loads of stuff in here, like a boxed Amiga game, CD32 stuff there in the middle as well. Stuff that you generally only find on eBay. Even merchandise like t-shirts and manuals. If you're ever short of a Windows 95 manual, you know where to go. Some old 90s copies of Edge magazine there too. Load more manuals for systems and programs. They also had some classic mags from back in the day, like Acorn and Micro User there as well. A lot more cover mounted tapes from magazines back in the 80s, like Commodore Format and Sinclair User and all that too. Even obscure stuff like Input magazine. That was a coding tutorial from back in the early 80s. Speaking of obscure stuff, a game.com on this retailer here. I think this is Console Passion guys. A lot of box systems too. And you generally find when you go to big shows like this, you can often get better prices on stuff than you can on eBay. Like for example, Joe here has got a copy of Chip and Dale there for the Nintendo, something he'd been looking for quite a long time apparently, which I think was only about £15. Ravi was eyeing up a Sega Saturn 3D controller in a box, which for £30 isn't bad actually. I think my unboxed one I got off eBay was about that price. Sinclair Spectrum thermal printer I think was a bit lower down there too. So they had some pretty odd hardware there that you often would have to look pretty far and wide to find. And also loads of games, box of Commodore 64 there for £70, which, if it's in pretty good condition, that's not bad for a C64, especially if you've got like a silver label one or something. I think the good thing about these shows is, though, you can often have a look at the condition and try them out before you take them home as well, which is obviously better than buying off someone that you have no idea who they are off eBay. Up here was pretty cool. Box Mega Drive 2, there's a 3DO there as well, and even a Multi-Mega, which was a Sega CD and Mega Drive all in one. £700 for that one though, so that was a bit steep. We had some PlayStation 1 software here as well, a box Atari Jaguar. The Amiga had to be kept in a cage because of its power.
And Ravi's ideal console.
Yeah.
PS2. Get a carry back for it as well.
I could get all my Barbie games for that. It'd be great.
He was very tempted to buy it. This bit was pretty interesting. Broken consoles for £7 each, most of which turned out to be Nintendo Wii U's. Now, I don't know what had happened to them. People had like snapped off the HDMI connectors in the ports. There was stuff like, being jammed into the fans, and the fan blades were all smashed up, and they were really, really beaten up and scratched. So I've got no idea how they got in that awful condition, but even for £7, I don't think you're bringing many of these back to life. Look how beaten up that is. Jim Bagley was there as well, the Spectrum legend, showing off a brand new version of the Spectrum based on an FPGA. This is called the ZX Spectrum Next. Now, we were just walking along, bumped into Jim. We're like, how you doing? What you here? What are you up to? What's going on? And he kind of told us about this and said, do you want to see it working? So we're like, too right. So we went over here with him. He set it up on a table. And this is actually an early beta of the ZX Spectrum Next. The final version will have more connections on here and be able to connect up to classic ZX Spectrum hardware. But here, he's actually streaming a video file off a micro SD card, which is in 16 colours, and I think the video is a gigabyte file size, he told me. So yeah, you're not going to be streaming that off a cassette tape, are you? Definitely the kind of thing you could only run on this kind of board. Some of the connectors there that are on the back already, VGA out, he's got a PS2 connector with the keyboard connected, a little kind of breakout box here with a few more connections on too. But I've read a lot about the Spectrum Next, so it was very cool to see it up and running in person, and really exciting bit of hardware actually. I am quite tempted to get one. The guys from Houston were here as well.
Oh, you're filming me?
Yeah, go on.
So this is Houston Consultants. You might remember some of the games that we did. Yeah, back in the day. So Commodore 64, Spectrum, and then this is our new game, Hyper Sentinel, which is a kind of retro gaming inspired shooter, done in the style of the old games, but with new effects and new kind of features. So yeah.
These guys were behind so many classic games back in the old days. It's awesome to see them back, showing off their new game here. Hyper Sentinel it's called. Now, there was actually some kind of classic Houston stuff on the table here, some very nostalgic bits of hardware and stuff from the 80s, but you can see the game running here. And there was this chap whose name I didn't get, who was actually filming it for his YouTube channel as well, and was trying out the game itself, which reminds me a bit of Iridium. Do you remember that game on the Commodore 64 and Iridium 2 on the Amiga back in the 90s? Played very similar, but this is going to be available on modern platforms, so it's definitely got that kind of throwback 80s nostalgic look to it. Even look at the artwork there, that looks incredible. And on the Houston stand they also had some kind of nostalgic bits from their old days, including their book, Video Game Pioneers recent book, and also some old cassette-based software pinned to the wall here too. So awesome to see Houston back. And this little look around here will give you a little look at the size of this expo. It was like the exhibition hall they held it in was massive, and even had areas with workshops. Like this guy here actually did the artwork for, I think it was Sonic 3 and Sonic and Knuckles, he was telling us, and he was doing a workshop on how to draw Sonic the Hedgehog. And as you can see, a lot of people in the audience there with pencils and paper, taking a few of his tips, and they had loads of workshops there across the weekend. By far one of the coolest bits of the entire event is the arcade section, which takes over probably the back quarter of the entire hall. Hundreds of free-to-play classic arcade machines, and I couldn't drag my mates away from House of the Dead. I think they're on there for about 2 hours in the end. Alex and Joe just playing on that after their turn, going to the back of the line, getting to the front, playing on it again. So yeah, in the end I just kind of left them to it and found them a bit later. But as you can see from this little look around here, so many classic arcades from the old days. Bit of Pac-Mania there, Paperboy with the bike handlebar controller as well. It takes me back to the seaside arcades like Scarborough and that back in the 80s and 90s. And again, all included in your ticket price, didn't have to put any money in them. So if you're an arcade fan, this is definitely an event that you should be looking at coming to next year. Probably the biggest collection of arcade machines I've seen. Even like there was about 4 aisles dedicated to pinball machines. And as you can see, we had a go at Dirty Harry, and I just love the look of classic pinball machines, all those flashing lights and the sounds and everything. You can't beat the feel of a proper authentic pinball table.
Are you getting your pictures
And Ravi met one of his heroes. Natalie Cook, her name is. She was actually the original model for Lara Croft back in the day. It was obviously the 20th anniversary recently. And he got his photo taken with her. There was some kind of nostalgic stuff around here too, including these giant Game Boys, which were not actually based on Game Boy hardware. They look pretty authentic, but then when you have a closer look at the screen, what's that say on there? Please insert a Nintendo GameCube disc. And their secret is given away when we have a little look around the back. Spoiling the magic. Polybius is Jeff Minter's new game. Now, Polybius was actually an arcade machine. It's an urban legend, a bit of a myth. Back in the early 80s, it was meant to be an arcade unit that appeared. Maybe like Men in Black kind of put it in there, and all the kids that played it had blackouts and seizures, and then it was never seen again. So he was actually demoing his new game Polybius on a PlayStation 4 VR unit. And people who tried this out said it was kind of like having what they imagined an acid trip would be like. So, typical surreal Jeff Minter, and it is great to see, Jeff and Llamasoft still continuing making new games. And as well as having his new game, he also had a few kind of classic bits from his history as well, including, how's this for obscure, a Nuon. Now, this was meant to be a gaming system that would go inside DVD machines back in the early 2000s. I think it was designed by the team that made the Atari Jaguar, or many of them. And actually it's got a lot of kind of, continuation of the Atari Jaguar in here too. Jeff actually did Tempest 3000, which was a follow-up to Tempest 2000 that he did on the Jaguar. First time I'd ever seen this playing in person, and he's got, the classic rotary controller here as well, his own custom version of it. And I've got to say, graphically it looked gorgeous. Just look at that. Really smooth. Love those vibrant neon colours on here as well. And I think there were only about 7 games ever released on the new one. They're definitely not very common, but if you're a Tempest fan, might be worth scoping one out. John Hare was there as well, talking to a documentary team. Now they're actually making a docudrama that's going to be coming out next summer. I actually appear in this as well. They randomly just came over to me after, asked me about my gaming history, and had a bit of a chat to them, so look out for that next year. Really, the reason we're on this stand is because they were showing off Sociable Soccer, which is John Hare's new project, and it is a spiritual successor to Sensible Soccer. If you're a big fan of Sensi on the Amiga, you'll be very at home on this. Even graphically and the way the game played, it's definitely got a lot of influence from Sensible Soccer, so it was cool to kind of try this out. It is still a beta version of this game, and I think the original might be a good, I think they originally said it was going to be out by Christmas, but could be maybe 6 months away yet. But it was great to actually try it out in person. And Ravi was playing it as I was holding the camera. He seemed pretty impressed. As was pretty much everyone we spoke to who tried it out that weekend.
So how do you compare to Sensi so far?
About the same difficulty level, but still requires skill and practice.
Neither of which you've got.
Neither of which I have, or anyone has.
So when the full game comes out, I'll no doubt give you a little let's play or a review of that. And the computer section was one of my favourite areas of the whole exhibition. Had some really obscure stuff, like as well this, a Next machine, a little Next workstation here.
Have you invented the World Wide Web yet?
I'm online!
That Tim Berners-Lee actually created the World Wide Web on a Next machine. And the really, really cool computers, OS 10 on the Mac kind of came out of that. An Acorn Archimedes that we'll come back to. Atari ST, a couple of Commodores there as well. The next set was really for coding, and had these really high resolution monitors that were great for design and DTP and that kind of thing. Not so great at gaming though, as we found out, as we're running a little Pac-Man clone in a window that was crawling along. Look how sluggish that looks. But I don't think they ever sold those as game machines, to be fair. The Acorn Archimedes was very nostalgic for me. First time I've really played one of these since I was at school. This is the A3020. We used to have A3000s, 3010s and 3020s at my school. And using RISC OS as well, which is a very nostalgic OS for me. And these were actually the first ARM-based computers. The ARM architecture came out of the Acorn range of computers back in the 80s and 90s. So they've got a very long legacy. And really at school though, we used to play I think it was Lander the game was called. It's also known as like Arch and Virus, I think, too. But really, I've never really played many games on the Acorn Archimedes. So it was cool to try out some titles that I'm familiar with on the Archie and see just how well they performed. Like Zool was a favourite of mine on the Amiga. Obviously, one big downfall of this machine is that it had no joystick connected, so I had to try and figure out how to play the games with the keyboard. There's no instructions provided. But looking at that, I mean, you know, graphically it looks very much on par with the original Amiga version. Apart from this, there's no kind of parallax background scrolling on the Prepare Yourself screen, which, you know, that's one difference I spotted. But when you get into the game itself, it actually plays really, really, really similar to the Amiga version. You know, the scrolling and everything's really smooth as well, so I was pretty impressed with how well the Acorn Archimedes handled these type of, you know, fast-moving platform games. I couldn't figure out how to jump on the keyboard, unfortunately, so it didn't last very long. Lemmings as well, another one of my favourites from back then. The title screen seemed to have less colours than the versions on other platforms, but when you get into the game itself, it looks pretty much identical to the Amiga version. The music sounds very similar, and even 25 years on, I still get a big kick out of blowing up all the lemmings. Very sadistic, I know. But yeah, very nice to use an Acorn Archimedes again after all this time. Ravi had a go on the Atari ST playing New Zealand Story. He's a big Amiga guy, not a huge fan of the Atari ST.
On the ST.
But I think he enjoyed trying it out. Ignore the stabbing motion. And the owner of this machine was kind enough to leave a load of disc-based games here as well, you know, very trusting. That's the thing about these shows though, you know, everyone just trusts everyone with stuff because it's a really nice community. It's, you know, just a bunch of nice guys getting together.
Cheers, Joe.
Time for a bit of lunch?
What's on the menu?
Just a chicken burger because of it was expensive.
Give us your review.
I'll give it a 5 out of 10.
What's on the menu, Alex?
Same as Joe, chicken burger.
It was typical event food, nothing special, but, you know, hit the spot. And this was really cool. This was actually a guy who'd done his own kind of another custom Spectrum board, but also what really interested me with this is a little tape player there, which I originally thought was a kind of homebrew mod, but he said no, you actually buy those from Argos for about 20 quid. It's a cassette tape player with a USB port on the top that you can play MP3 files off through the cassette tape, and that means, you know, on old systems like the ZX Spectrum, you can play games from the cassette tape via that USB stick, which is really cool. And to round off this video, we had to have a go on this virtual reality from 1991 or 1992. Now, a lot of people think the VR is a new development. It definitely isn't. It harks back to the early 90s. And this was one of the first kind of mass market virtual reality machines. You'd find these in a lot of like seaside arcades and bowling alleys and that kind of thing, called Virtuality. Now, there are a few different variants of it. We played on some of these stand-up machines at the Play Expo in Blackpool at the start of the summer. This is a sit-down cabinet, playing a game that's actually very similar to Iron Soldier on the Atari Jaguar, kind of a mech kind of based game. And as you can see, a lot of kind of the foundations of virtual reality were there, even in this very early stage. This machine is actually based on an Amiga 3000 with some custom video hardware, so this is running on Amiga hardware, which, you know, is obviously really cool for me, being a big fan of the Amiga. But a lot of kind of the foundations of VR were already present in these early versions, including, you know, kind of the movement and the tracking. Obviously, it wasn't like texture mapped, and the frame rate is about 15 frames a second. But after chatting to Ravi, who is playing this machine at the moment, he said that it didn't kind of feel like a motion sickness or anything. It was actually quite a smooth experience, which I think is probably a lot easier when you're sitting down as opposed to the walk-around units that they also have. But I do remember seeing these virtuality machines in my local seaside arcades and stuff that were like a $5 to play on then. And obviously that kind of classic virtual reality helmet is such an iconic look. You remember like Games Master and Bad Influence, they always kind of featured that virtuality helmet, so it's you know, definitely a classic. And it's just cool that they still have these up and running in working order, and they often tour all of these retro shows. So thank you for watching this video. Hopefully you enjoyed this little tour of Play Expo Manchester 2016. By far the best retro show that I think I've ever been to. If you haven't made it along to it yet, we'll definitely be there same time next year. I'd suggest that you come along and try it out. You know, it runs on the Saturday and the Sunday usually, and you meet so many cool people. I think he's ending up for the VR at this point. And yeah, just come along and try out all these classic machines and buy some stuff at good prices. So thank you for checking out this video. I'll catch you again next time, and I think we'll finish with a nice little close-up on the Amiga 3000 keyboard as well, and a little look inside the virtuality machine. See you in the next vid.